Sometimes people ask me what I'm reading, and so I want to go over the latest book. I was on my way to a vacation, and I was going to have a long time to just sit, and my son-in-law, Evan Humphreys, sent me this book, and he said, read this on your vacation. He kind of, I wouldn't say he ruined my vacation, but he filled it with big, deep thoughts. This book, Immoderate Greatness, Why Civilizations Fail by William Ophuls, is one of the most important books I've ever read in my life. It's not very thick, and it's one of those books that I really love because he is going to popularize and simplify the work of, these are the footnotes. These are scholarly studies of how civilizations rise and fall. And, he mentions 11 different great societies that rose and then were at their peak of power and then collapsed. And they tend to do it in about 250 years. And this book is from 2012. And I actually was shocked that it was 2012 because as he starts describing the current circumstances in our world, it's like, oh, they just put this book together, using the modern, like what's been in the news for the last year. And then I go back and I say, well, when did he write this? It's like, oh my gosh, so prescient. And, see that future. Anyway, so let me just walk you through it. He basically says that, and again, he is echoing the research of other historians who just watched this crazy, repetitive cycle of societies that they can rise to amazing greatness and then just suddenly collapse. He gets the name Immoderate Greatness from a quote by Edward Gibbon. The decline of Rome was the natural and inevitable effect of immoderate greatness. It's kind of the idea that what if you had a sailboat and it's, I'm going to say 42-foot sailboat racing yacht. It's awesome. And then, but you want to be faster. So you just keep making this sail bigger. And every year you come out with a bigger sail, bigger, must be bigger. And then there's just that day where the weight of the sail falls over and pulls the whole boat upside down. So that is the basic concept behind why civilizations fail over and over again. Let me walk through. He's got two different sections in the failure. It's really important. First one is biophysical limits. There are limits to ecology. There are limits to the human, limits to social systems. And these are limits that we keep surpassing. We go beyond the limit. You're redlining the RPMs in all of these. And then secondly, human error. Things happen inside humans as we build societies and we start to create the circumstances that crash things ultimately. So first, is the Greeks, is that Greek? Hubris? That sounds Latin. Overweening pride in a human, that we just get cocky and we believe we're above it all and we don't have the necessary humility. That's why Machiavelli says, and he quotes, that you can basically, the reason history repeats is that humans don't change. And he really doesn't have a great prescription in the end except to say until the human heart and mind changes about greatness, we're going to keep crashing the things we build. And I think it's an important study about whole societies and about civilization as a whole, but also about churches, businesses, families, your career. It's the exact same pattern over and over again. So I am just getting so much out of this. And so, okay, let me just do a quick overview, okay? Chapter 1, because maybe you don't have time to read this. but the concepts I would love for you to get. Chapter 1, ecological exhaustion. He quotes, "Forests precede civilizations, deserts follow them." And he opens with this short sentence: "The city is an ecological parasite." So I never even thought of that. Like, the city makes nothing. All it does is suck. It sucks energy. And so it starts taking resources. It takes all the resources available. It needs water. It wants all the water. And then it starts to take the food. It takes the timber. It just keeps reaching out farther and farther. When it can no longer supply its needs, it wants to annex the next little town and pull it into its city. And as we build empires and we strip our own land bare, then we want to go to war. And we start making war with our neighbors to steal their stuff and pull it in, because the city is a parasite. But here's the thing: the bigger the parasite, the hungrier it is. So when you've got a moderate-sized city, there's an equilibrium you can build. But no, we want mega city. It's like, well, that's a hungry city. And, I have lived in a city of 16 million people, and it's a beast to watch it. And you just think, if there's not an army, I mean, these are like a beehive of trucks that haul in today's food for every one of us, no one's going to eat, because nobody here is creating anything. And that's the point. And so you come to this place of ecological exhaustion because you just keep destroying the system around you, and you don't put anything back, because the city is only a parasite. Like, even the waste, even human waste. In nature, civilization, his contention is civilization is an unnatural thing. It doesn't exist in nature. And so in order to exist, it has to overcome nature, overwhelm nature, chop nature back, and use nature to fuel itself. But eventually, so even things like human waste, in the natural world, animals eat food, it digests the food, the animal poops out the food, it goes back into the soil, it continues to break down, and now that's fuel for the next things that grow. Well, humans take all of this, and then we put it, though, in a septic system and get rid of it. Largely, if you can get to the ocean, it just gets dumped in the ocean. So we're not even putting back the compost of the waste of food is not being restored to the soil. Again, we're just taking out, and we want more. So you will come to a place, and you'll have limits. And when you have these limits and you're not able to, steal everything you want from others, then you're going to come up with other systems. And every time you come up with a new technology, you think you've solved your problem with technology. But technology requires resources to run. So anyway, that's chapter 1, is you ecologically exhaust your surroundings. Number 2, exponential growth. And he has a good chapter here on just what a bank account. If you had a bank account and you put money in it and you just let it grow at 7.2%, you watch it, it goes for a long time, and it's like, that's not that much growth. And then all of a sudden, it's growth on the growth on the growth on the growth, and then it kicks up. He said, by being so in love with growth, and always pushing for growth, like every quarter has to be growth. And now that we have a thing called the stock market, used to, you just had your business. It lived or died. But now, no, we have the pretend money. It's real money, but it's like, it's not even your business. Because when the stock goes up and down, it doesn't mean that company just benefited from it. The stock benefited from it. So you got this pressure on companies all over the world now that there are stock markets and people are trading in part ownership of the companies. Growth, always growth. You must have growth. Every quarter has to show growth. If you ever don't show growth, we want to fire the top management. So this love for exponential growth follows the same pattern as compound interest. And eventually it's that sail that becomes heavier than the whole boat, because you're outstripping your resource base. You're not allowing it to reset, and you're not letting there be a normal flow of things. Number 3, chapter 3, expedited entropy. And he wants to talk about the whole concept of entropy, that when you take energy and you change it to another kind of energy, it's never efficient. You always lose in the transfer. For example, if I make a cup of tea and it's hot and steamy and I set it, I used electricity to do that. I put it in a teapot. I set the teacup on the counter. I don't have to wonder an hour from now if that tea is still boiling. I don't have to, you can't set a glass of water on a counter and then come back later and go, I better check. This stuff may be really hot. It's always going to be cooler. It's always losing, and we always lose. When you do things, it's never efficient. You lose. And even growing food, you lose. You take energy, petrochemicals, and you plant and you grow food, and then you think, okay, well, I took energy and now I get food out of it. And he says civilization multiplies entropy because of the pressure and the systems, and that you actually always lose when you grow food. And he does the math on it, where you'll end up a lot of things. You think you're creating a big harvest, but he said you spent 10 to grow 1. And civilization will keep doing this. And so, they are fueling the entropy that pulls things down. Number 4, excessive complexity. Because in the beginning, everyone in a civilization is all together. You are one people, you have one vision, one mission, and you're going to do it. And you pull together, it is so optimal. And then over time, you succeed. And now you roll into a second phase, which is the merchants. In the beginning, it was the pioneers. And the second group are the merchants. Now there's prosperity, and there's stuff we need. And so now there just starts to be all this buy and sell, and everybody starts to prosper. But as we prosper out of the unity into a bunch of markets and divisions and political parties and all of it. It just keeps dividing up until finally you have a lot of people in the same place, but they're not exactly on the same page. And these systems become really complicated, down to how do we get food into this city? That system becomes overly complex, and it just never gets more simple. It only gets more complicated. And so after a while, you've got hundreds of years of occupational roles multiplying and diversity. You bring more and more diversity into your country, and you start having more and more diverse ways of thinking, and then you're mainly battling out, with your thoughts, and there's just this big fight. And that's why I think there's a return to totalitarian government, is to pull back and push all the energy into doing what government says to do. It's like all of you have a microphone, and this is just chaos. We are falling apart. And it's part of the complexity. It's one of the problems of democracy. When you invite complexity in your system, you are fragmenting its ability to go forward. One of the things he said was the only way to stop all this is to stop with the growth. Like, you got to be willing. You can avoid the crash if you don't allow for the spike. And the way you get the spike is easy credit. So and inflation. When a civilization is in dire straits, the leaders do not want to face dealing with it. And so they will allow for the inflation of their economy so the party can keep on going and everybody can keep having a good time under their watch. And so you could just see this thing coming up. And then he says the next season is human errors, because you start to make mistakes dealing with in entirely unsolvable problems, and then practical failure ensues. So the only way to keep this from happening would be to flatten things pretty routinely. And this is where I thought, wow, this isn't in the book, but I thought the Old Testament system is so genius. You know, that every seventh year, Sabbath year, and like we stop enterprise. We just level it out. We all have a year of rest, and we just make do. We just get through. And then every generation, every 50 years, according to the law, you completely collapse the economy again. And you send everyone back to their great-great-great-grandfather's original piece of land. You lose all your assets. You go back to the original piece of land, and you start over. It's a radical idea, but if you lived like that, you can stay in step with nature. There is a floor to how low we can crash, and we have a whole generation to grow. So you get the experience of your own life, building what you can build, and then it goes back down. Your kids are going to have to start over. But, you know, there are people that will, you know, they get to the top, and because they have bad habits and they're alcoholics and they make bad choices, they gamble all the time, yes, they're going to lose everything. But they get it all back. The next generation doesn't have to suffer because of their bad actions or just what could have happened by mistake to that family. But that it's just these cycles, you know, that God in his wisdom could see if you're going to live on the land and you're going to be part of the land, he's stopping this, you know, this immoderate greatness. And he's just like, you can go up, and then 50 years, we're going to start it over. It's for your lifetime to rebuild it. And then, so that, you know, like in the law, if you wanted to buy a piece of land, your first question would be, how many years until Jubilee? Because if there's only 5 years and then it's got to go back to the original owner, then I'm not going to build anything big on it. It's not worth that much. It's mainly how many harvests are left on the land. If I'm going to work the land for 5 years, I'll get this much value. So I can give you that, and then I can make more than that with my 5 years. Whereas a piece of land, if you sell it the year after Jubilee, I get 50 years on this land before I have to give it back. But there was always a giving it back. And by doing that, we can avoid this. So anyway, at the end, you know, he's not real optimistic that any government, he says no government in history has ever dealt with their need to fix the system. And the system is always about greatness that goes beyond the boundary. It's the greatness that collapses the enterprise. So anyway, I mean, how big should your life get? How much should you spend if you had all the money in the world? How big? The whole bigness of everything. It's a really important book, and I highly recommend it.